regardless of draft picks, value, where they're picking, whatever. If you could just pick the two positions that the 49ers should address or you would like them to address with their first two picks, if you could just say, I want a DT and a safety or whatever, what are the first two positions that kind of come to your mind? And again, doesn't matter if we trade up, trade back, not looking for specific names, but just some positions that you think the 49ers should target early with their priority picks.
Yeah, so when you ask about the early picks, it actually changes the conversation because I'm not going to mention what I think is their largest positional need because I think that can be found later in the draft typically. So I'll preface it by saying what I think is their largest positional need. It's the interior defensive line. They need some size. They miss DJ Jones's size. Kinlaw played well actually when he originally came back from injury. And then I know a lot of people got on him for the Eagles game, which I thought was kind of an easy way to pick on him because he didn't have a strong playoffs at all. And to me, the reflection I have on Kinlaw is that that knee is still not right. It's still not fully there. I know that there was some reporting that, hey, Kinlaw himself wanted to play. That's why the Niners didn't rule him out this year. The Niners didn't feel like the knee was there. We don't know when the knee is ever going to be there, but they need size. They have a lot of these smaller gap shooters, right? When Ridgeway got hurt, they brought in T.Y. McGill, who brought penetration and quickness. Kevin Givens is, again, a smaller guy that penetrates in quickness, but they need some size to eat up double teams, give Armstead some help. But that's their first kind of positional need. I think that guy can be addressed in the 5th and 6th round, and Kalia Davis is coming back as well. So we'll find out if he's there. In terms of positional need right off the bat, to me, it's bring in a right tackle. That guy doesn't, you're not going to find a starting right tackle in the 3rd round. You're not going to find one in the 4th round. Maybe you do, but likely the traits aren't there. But bring in a guy that's young that you can develop to compete with Colton McKivitz. I think Colton McKivitz can be serviceable given his price tag and the fact that he competes his butt off and he's smart. He knows the system and he's physical and he's tough and he does his job. But you do need some sort of long-term competition there and some sort of plan. So that would be my first thing because I think Mike McGlinchey is right out the door. A lot of 49ers fans disrespect Mike McGlinchey. Mike McGlinchey is about to get a massive contract this offseason.
Yeah.
That's going to shock a lot of people. And I would love the Niners to bring him back. I don't think they can afford it. And so the second position then to me is safety. What is the situation with Tashawn Gibson? Jimmy Ward to me is out the door. I felt like he's been out the door from the beginning. He's said as much. I think the
Yeah.
nickel spot for Jimmy Ward is completely replaceable because I think Mosley should be priority 1 in free agents coming back, and that leaves Womack and Lenore to kind of compete for the nickel spot. Both guys have shown the ability to do it. We'll find out this offseason. But it's find that safety next to Hufanga. I think obviously, if you could bring Gibson back, it would be ideal because he's kind of the perfect option for this defense. He's a veteran player who knows his job. He understands the pass game. He can play from the post. He's always in the right spot. He's not running anybody down now, as we saw. He couldn't run down Trent Sherfield, couldn't run down a few guys, but he does his job at a high level. But if you're unable to bring him back, there has to be some sort of replacement there. I don't think George Odom is that guy. I don't think Tarvarius Moore is that guy. There has to be a guy back there. And it won't be a 1-for-1 replacement of Gibson. You will likely draft a guy with better physical traits, but won't make up for the vast experience and knowledge that Gibson brought to the back end. But to me, that's the other position that you kind of need to find a starter as well.
Man, it's interesting what you said about Gibson because, whenever I'm doing the film, Gibson is just always, he's an umbrella is what I call him
Right.
because he just stays on top. He doesn't go anywhere fast. He's not fast, but
Right.
he just instincts and awareness and just always just the umbrella, just right on top of the ball carrier, doing his job as a true safety. It's funny because him and Hufanga are quote unquote safeties,
Yeah.
could not be more diametrically opposed.
Right.
You got like the rabid just flying in there with his hair on fire, and then you've got the old age just sitting on top doing my job. I'm good. I don't have to get in the pile. I'm all right.
And it's a really interesting conversation, right? Because the conversation on Niners Twitter has always been Hufanga Tart. And it's a really nice conversation. It's a great conversation. A lot of people like debating it. As someone who felt like Hufanga wasn't going to adequately replace what Tart's brought to this defense, it's not a Hufanga Tart debate anymore to me because they did replace Tart, but it was never Hufanga that replaced Tart. It's Gibson that's doing his job, that's being the veteran that stays back there. In fact, he's brought better ball production than Tart ever did. And I love Tart. He's a good guy. He came on my show a couple of times. Great guy.
That was
But
awesome.
he
That
never
was
brought
awesome.
the ball production that Gibson brought. And you look at that kind of veteran presence that's going to be in the right spot, that understands your defense, understands the pass game. It allows Hufanga to play as free as he did this year, because the communication between those two guys I thought was really, really underrated. The Niners have a lot of different coverage shifts and different shifts based on, motions, what happens on 3x1s, a lot of that and stuff like that. And a lot of people do jump on the bus. And the thing they don't understand is they're communicating on 80 different plays. So if they bust one, they're actually batting 79 for 80, which is a pretty ridiculous number. But, people only notice the ones they bust. But there were so many different coverage rotations, different things they got right. And I thought Gibson had such a huge role in that. And I think Hufanga is actually ready to become the veteran to a younger player at safety. And I don't know if it's time that you go back to Gibson, because for whatever reason, I'm going to go back to 2014 here a little bit. John, I feel like there's a little bit of an Antoine Bethea situation here, where you
Ooh.
got this veteran who plays really, really well his first year, but I don't know if Gibson can reproduce exactly what he did last year for the next year 49ers. And we saw that a little bit with Antoine Bethea, where 2014 he might have been the best player on the 49ers defense, and then 2015 was kind of, hey, Antoine Bethea said goodbye, and that was his NFL career, and they moved on to Tart being the starter at safety. So I do think there's a little bit of that situation. I would actually like them, even if they bring back Gibson, to get a young option at safety that's, hey, he's our future there.
Yeah, a couple things. You talked about the ball production. Last year, the 49ers had 9 interceptions for the entire season. This year, over 20, but 9 of those interceptions were the safeties. 5, Gibson led the NFL, or led the 49ers in picks with 5, and then Hufanga with 4. And again, piggybacking on that communication. One of the things that I thought was I don't know, maybe perhaps a misnarrative, is how clean Hufanga was in probably the last 5 games, including the
Yeah,
playoffs. Because we saw the busted coverages earlier, and yeah, the flat came out for him, and rightfully so. But man, through the playoffs, Hufanga was as clean as he's been all year. And so I still see his play is ascending, but who's his partner in crime going to be? That's one of the things that's interesting. I'm with you. I think that, last year,
right,
everybody was crying safety, safety, first pick, safety, safety. And they didn't
right,
draft
right.
one. They
There
didn't
you
touch
go.
one of
Yeah.
them.
And Tashawn Gibson fell out of heaven for them.
Yeah.
Dude, even the Hufanga bust situation, like for example against the Raiders, there's a couple of busts. So for me, with Hufanga, the bust that concerned me more were earlier in the season when he had issues filling from the alley. In terms of, there was a Christian McCaffrey
Yes.
touchdown run early in the season. It's a tough play. The play is drifting towards the sideline. He's got him one-on-one in the alley, and McCaffrey made a miss and scored a touchdown. Not that big of a deal, right? But those are the little things that Jimmy Ward used to do, where it's a 20-yard play. It's only a 20-yard play. You don't turn it into an 80-yard play. The bust, like for example, against the Raiders, I don't know. He's got the C gap in the run fit. He's got to be aggressive against the run, because if he's late to fill, you're going to get on him. Okay, he was aggressive against the run, and they got him on a play. I look at that as Josh McDaniels being a little bit more aware of what the 49ers were going to do defensively, and having a counter to that, rather than, oh my God, Talanoa Hufanga is the worst player ever, cut him tomorrow. But that's just the reactions we get all the time, John, when we do this.
Yeah, you can't go wrong. And even talking about Kinlaw, just circling back before we jump to our next comment here. Kinlaw had some very, very bad plays against the Eagles. They were all in the first half. And
Right,
so I did the first half breakdown, because I break them up into half so they're not too long. And I walked away from the first half like, okay, this is by far the worst Kinlaw's ever played. Then I come out in the second half. The dude made 3 consecutive plays in a row where they
right,
sexy or whatever, but he didn't have a bad play in the second half. So, like, I walked away like, okay, he had a bad first half. He adjusted. He came out and played very, very well in the second half. I don't know. I'm not ready to write off the whole Kinlaw thing. I know the knee's terrible, and we'll have that time. But I'm with you in the fact that you cannot have enough DTs, and the fact that I think it's like 4 out of 14. We only have 4 defensive linemen under contract out of the
right,
14.
right, right.
You're going to need lots of people.
The 49ers Rush Podcast.